Film adaptation is the process of transposition from one media medium to another. Even if many times we don't even realize it, film adaptation is part of our everyday life. Just think of all those films or television series we see every day, without even taking a moment to ask ourselves who is responsible for getting a film or series translated and adapted from the original language to ours. How much time and study does this process need? In order to be able to answer all these questions, it is first of all necessary to understand that film adaptation is a real art, which requires dedication, perseverance, techniques and strategies, not limited to a simple knowledge of the source language, but to translate the story into a completely different language, the language of films, which includes cinematography, art direction, acting, editing, sound design, special effects, soundtrack. All these elements work together to communicate ideas and emotions. In addition, the work of adaptation employs systems of transformation, transposition, and appropriation that are staggered over the time of filmmaking. As the scholar Linda Achon mentions in her book A Theory of Adaptation, having to define the term adaptation is very complex, because it can be used to describe both the process and the product. On the one hand, there is the process of adaptation, during which the transition from a written text to an audiovisual one takes place. On the other hand, there is the result of this process, there is the finished film, ready for distribution. From the very beginning, we can see how Italian films were linked and conditioned by literature and its structures, considering it as an inexhaustible reservoir of stories and characters. It is not by chance that the first film products in Italy are mostly of literary origin. Since the first 20 years, the aim has been trying to bring the main elements of a literary text into cinema, through images, without even having the will to change their literary structures. The cinematographic product and the literary text, although they are both sources of storytelling, have different expressive systems. Cinema has an expressive system based mainly on images, while literature bases its expressive system on words. Generally, film has to work from perception towards meaning, that is, from external facts to inner motivations and consequences. Literary fiction, on the other hand, works in the opposite way. It starts with signs, graphemes, and words, constructing propositions that attempt to develop perception. In literature and film, there are two totally different approaches that reveal a fundamental difference between cinema and literature regarding the question of truth, so that it raises a problem that many filmmakers have found during the process of adaptation, namely that of keeping the viewer's belief in what they are seeing alive. But that is not always easy. In literature, the problem is more easily solved, since words do not have the objectivity of objects, which is present in film images. Nevertheless, most of the theories about the difference between cinema and literature were based on prejudices for which literature was given greater formative power, as it was able to stimulate the mind and imagination of the reader, while cinema is able to involve the public in a different way, for which it will find everything ready, without the need to bring into play its imagination. Thanks to the advent of sound, cinema was finally defined as the most effective means of artistic expression. But before reaching a real stability of thought for the consolidation of cinema, there have different points of view and different lines of thought, which only created uncertainty and loss of interest in films. During the 90s, Italy has seen a decisive rebirth of cinema, which has stabilized in the 2000s, thanks in part to works such as Il Fuggiasco by Andrea Manni, Tutti giù per terra by Davide Ferrario, and Almost Blue by Alex Infascelli. In conclusion, it can be said that the world of film adaptation is much more complex than what most people have always believed, who have never had any qualms about raising criticisms and discussions without really realizing the problems that can be encountered along the way of adaptation. There is a complex and, in turn, very delicate process.